harder. I don't know what, I know they're doing stuff that they don't have a license to do, what the specifics are, I don't know. But it makes it a little harder with the, oh, we just didn't, oh, man. Yes. Yeah.
budget
And there was
retreat.
no attachment.
Thank you for all the staff being here, being prepared, and citizens. I see Sandy over there, so we do have citizens here. Have some of the council members have contacted me that they're going to be running late. So now is your opportunity to get things done. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, and we'll start through the program.
Thank you, Mayor Ford.
Oh, I do have one announcement before
Yes.
you get started.
Go right ahead.
Long-time Adams County resident Phil Spano passed away. And I think it's important that we do something, send something over to the family. Phil was either liked or hated, but he did a lot for Adams County over the years, a lot. So he was, I believe, 91 years old, and his services will be Thursday at 11 o'clock. So I wanted everybody to know that. He has become a friend of mine for many, many years, but he did a lot of land development stuff. Outside of the landfill stuff that he did, he was always involved with Adams County. So he's one of the old guard forefathers of Adams County, and it's important we acknowledge that.
Chief got his gun? Has the chief got his gun?
Sorry, Mayor.
That's all right.
Well, thank you, Mayor Ford. Just some brief opening remarks. I'll start with some notes about logistics. We are trying going to make a comment, so any side comments you might be having don't inadvertently We walked through the legislative budget that night, the section of the 2018 budget that has a number of things that are city council specific expenditures that occur during the year. We walked through the draft 2K O&M policy, and council provided some feedback to staff on that. We talked about recreation fees and charges, and the city council provided some feedback. We also reviewed a refined list of additional requests that are included in the draft 2018 budget. And we also wanted to point out we did have a discussion about historic preservation on the 14th, and wanted to clarify that the option that seemed to be the consensus of council that night, which was to budget $50,000 for some consulting work to help further develop a historic preservation plan and ordinance, is included now in the draft 2018 budget. And so that brings us to tonight. We have a list of things that you've seen in the packet for us to cover tonight. Most of them are topics that we've touched on previously, but there are a couple that you'll be seeing tonight for the first time, and that is a slightly different approach to purchasing fleet vehicles. And we continued from the last study session an overview of the Recreation Division staffing model to help support, among other things, the new recreation center when it opens next spring. We did structure the list of items to cover tonight in the general categories of sources and uses. It seemed a logical way to me to walk through the key items for council to discuss tonight. So we'll walk through some things on the revenue side that would be important for council to weigh on and provide us direction, and then we'll shift over to the expense side of the budget. The goal of the budget retreat is clear direction from city council to staff so that we can prepare the formal draft budget document and start that budget document through the formal adoption process. So as in past years, the goal is good, robust discussion such that we get clear direction from city council and can start preparing that draft document in alignment with council's wishes for the 2018 budget. So with that, unless there are any questions, we're going to jump right in and start with a snapshot of the total budget, sources and uses, and then we'll start to make our way through the specific items that are on the list. So Finance Director Karstens is going to lead us off.
Thank you. This is a snapshot of the source and use document. I'm not going to go over this in great detail right now. We'll wrap up with more of the details at the end. Sorry. We'll wrap up with more of the details at the end, but this is just showing you all of the revenues, regular general fund as well as the 2K, and the sources, any transfers out of the general fund, and where we anticipate that we're going to end up. So you can see a 2018 general fund surplus of $498,000, and then a 2K fund balance surplus of $88,000. As we walk through the various parts of the presentation, you'll see how those numbers come into play, and then I will be talking about them more specifically near the end. So specifically to set off, we want to talk about revenue. So this slide shows the general fund revenues, and a few things I want to bring to your attention is in this number is the road and bridge tax that in 2016 we dedicated and said we were going to transfer to CIP. This year the highway users tax dollars are in there as well. We're suggesting to move those to CIP for dedicated purposes. And then this also shows us transferring back $1.2 million from the fleet fund balance. As we get further into the presentation and talk about the potential of doing a lease option, that will become more clear why we're recommending that. And then the 2K policy implementation that we presented a couple of times in the past shows an influx from 2K revenue of about $642,000. And then this also breaks down the 1% revenues, which is the dedicated 1% taxes, as well as Paradise Pool and the new rec center. Something of note, when we originally did the estimates for the revenue projections, we started out with a number for sales and use tax like we do each year. We now have 6 months of that activity in the door. We are seeing that come in higher this year, so we have made a modest adjustment for that. We still are trying to be very conservative. Everything we're reading and seeing indicates that next year could either be flat or a negative, so we want to be careful in that projection, but we did bump that sales and use tax number up just slightly for today's presentation. The other thing that this revenue also takes into account is when Michelle presented the CIP the last study session, she talked about taking a portion of the general fund revenues and setting that aside for CIP. A portion of that we're recommending would be for contingency dollars, and a portion of that is to fund CIP projects. And Michelle will talk about that further, but wanted to just make a note of that on this revenue slide.
Thank you, Cheryl. As Cheryl mentioned, some of the things we're showing on these initial overview slides include some items that we'll be discussing tonight, but it's our best recommendation at this point in time of total sources and total uses. So with that, one of the items we know we need to circle back on is recreation fees. We've had two good, thorough discussions amongst council about recreation fees, but there's some open-ended items that we wanted to circle back on. Based on the last discussion on August 14th, we've put together some options, but I've asked Roger to walk through the items that are left to be resolved so that City Council can have a follow-up discussion and hopefully provide some direction to us.
Thank you. So these are the three issues that we need you to take a look at and make a decision on in terms of providing guidance. We have the resident child and youth fees that was discussed, also the resident senior fees, and then also to discuss the effective dates for all the fees for the two recreation centers. So we've pulled out the child and youth residential and done that also on the individual annual membership, and so I'll just go right to what was proposed. So currently the fee is at $1, and that was proposed to go to $2 for the child, and then the youth resident to go from $2 to $3. So there's basically three options. One is stay with the existing fee that's current right now. The other option is to go with what was proposed and requested. Third option is to do something in between. So really just those three options, and wanted to see what direction you wanted to provide on those.
All right, council. Mr. Bullock?
I'd like to just stay where they are right now.
Anyone else? Mr. Douglas?
Yes, I would like to keep where it's at right now as well. Thank you.
Mr. Teeter?
Yes, I'm for leaving them where they're at.
Councilwoman Carson?
Leave it where it's at.
Yep. Jason, Mr. McEldowney?
I was obviously not at the last study session where this was discussed, so I didn't get a great sense of what the impetus was for wanting to hold these flat. I know we had some heavy discussion previously about the impact. Can anybody summarize for me what the thinking was in terms of why holding them and for how long?
Mr. Bullock?
The impetus was that we're going to be opening a new rec center up north, and all the time before, okay, in my opinion, and this is just me, we've known since 2013 we're going to open a new rec center and we're going to remodel this that's basically going to be a new rec center. And we didn't do anything with it for the people up north or anything. It comes down to the finish line. 6 months before the finish line, you say, okay, now we're going to open a new rec center up north. Let's change the fees to something higher for seniors and for kids and youth. And I'm thinking, basically, if we were going to do it, we had 5 years to do it, and we could have stepped up and done it. We didn't do it, let's give them the same rate that we've had down here, and let's do it in a year, 18 months, where they don't feel like they are paying for something new. When we say a quality community for a lifetime, we're saying this for everyone. We aren't saying, okay, we built you something new, we're gonna charge you more now, and these people down here will be bumped up, but for 5 years, it stayed the same. And that's the same argument I'm gonna use when we get to the seniors, so if you don't wanna hear it again, that's the same thing I'm gonna say. I like your options, but your options still get to a point where don't blow smoke up my leg and call me a chimney like I don't know. Let's leave well enough alone, and let's gradually bring everybody in at the same time, or wait, not now, but down the road. And that was basically the main argument for most of the council at the last meeting. Matter of fact, I think it was all the council. Was anybody that disagreed with that?
Mr. Douglas, you have something to add?
No.
No? Okay, go ahead, Mr. McAdoo.
So I appreciate the background. I guess the challenge I have is we knew that there was going to be a discussion about fees and charges at some point in association with the new rec center. That was part of the overall program plan in terms of when that conversation was going to happen. Similar to having the conversation in advance of the pool opening, we had a conversation that led that to set those rates. I guess my challenge is I am concerned that if there's not an increase now, the odds of there being an increase next year, the year after, we're dependent on a new cast of players to have that conversation. I hate to see these rates get stuck where they are, which, based on what we see in terms of comparisons, is relatively low. I would at least want to see us agree to, and again, we can't encumber a future council with a decision or discussion now, but I would even be up for a minimal nominal increase now to illustrate that we need to step that up. Again, we're not talking about make or break dollars, but we're talking about dollars that help offset the programming. And until and unless we are able to start to ratchet that up, we're gonna be paying for all of this one way or the other. And I guess
Let me get to everybody else.
yeah, I'll pause.
Councilwoman Elliott.
Keep these the same.
All right. Let me go to Mr. Diaz.
I agree with keeping it the same.
All right. Now I'm going to go back to those who want to comment. Mr. Bullard.
Okay, I totally understand where Jason is coming from with wanting to ratchet up with non-residents. I see no problem with this at all, because those are non-resident people. But when you go back, and I'm glad he brought up Paradise. Paradise was a brand new paradigm with us, and we found out right away with non-residents, they took the place of our residents. If we'd have had a rate there for our non-residents that made it not where they came and they got the pool and our kids come over at 12 o'clock and can't get in because it's already crowded, I can understand with any of the non-residents rates, unless the person is like, I'm going to use the name George Maxey. He's a non-resident of this city, but George Maxey is one of our people that has been with the senior program forever. Those people would be grandfathered in under the senior program, and but the non-residents, we have no obligation to them to not charge them $125, $150, whatever you want. And if they want to come to our program, and non-resident children and youth, we have no obligation not to charge them. But our own resident and youth, I would say let's it stay, and if you want to put something, a caveat in right now, that in a year that these rates take effect, so everybody's had the same rate for a year, I wouldn't mind that one bit. But like Jason said before, we can't hold other councils to, once we're gone, they can change and do whatever they want. But that would be the caveat I would put on it right now, that we leave this as it is for a year, and in a year that the new fees automatically take place with the youth and the children. But we'll get to the seniors. That's a different conversation when we get to that.
Councilwoman Carson.
Mr. McEldowney, I understand your concerns, but mine are that I've sat here for 8 years. There's never been a proposal to increase recreation fees. I have been the council liaison to Parks and Rec the entire 8 years. So it does very much feel that it is targeted to the opening of the new Northern Rec Center. As a counselor who was out there talking to our citizens about 2K and why they should support that and vote yes, we very much included this. O&M would be included with the 2K. I know that I have fellow counselors, one right beside me, who we've discussed many times. How do we get creative and make this a free program for our students, as Denver does? So I will say that I did talk to the chair of our Parks and Rec Advisory Board and explained that I was disappointed in that board, that board just took a comparison of other cities and said, this is where we'll take Commerce City. We were very creative with 2K. We asked our citizens to understand that. Cities around us realize how terrific this was of what we did. So why do we want to fall short and not continue this creative thinking and just, bam, doing an increase when, like I said, we haven't even had a proposal for an increase over 8 years. And instead of saying, let's do some real good research. How does Denver do this? What are the guidelines? Is there a way that we can support the youth within Commerce City, so that this is a facility that, and I'm speaking for the seniors also, because there's two groups that I would like to see highly active within the recreation, and that's our youth and our seniors. I think our city prospers from that. So I would like to, and agreed, some of us are done here, but I still would like to see more creative thinking of where these fees could go instead of just showing me what surrounding cities have, and let's get in line with that. Commerce City doesn't need to get in line and be exactly like everybody else.
Mr. Douglas.
Yes, thank you. Understand, and I appreciate what your Councilman McEldowney, what you're saying, and I believe if this 2K was put in the ballot that it was going to sunset in 10 years, then I could see, hey, we need to make some adjustments so we don't take that hit in 10 years. This is a tax that's going to go on. We did go out and promote this with our citizens that would help with the operation and maintenance of our facilities that are around the 2K. And we did 5 projects in 5 years. And so I feel that, I'm looking at the senior rates, and if we change those, how much we would get. And it's really not that much difference on the options. And so I feel that's why I'm supportive of keeping the fees the way they are, because, like I said, our youth and our seniors are, ones that just starting a life out. The other ones, your retirement, and you want to take life as it comes, and you also are expected to carry your own. And so I think we need to help on that side when it comes to seniors and our youth. We need to make sure these kids have some place to go. Hear time and time again, what's available for our kids, and at least they would have 2 options as far as where to rec. So that's why my position on keeping it as it is.
Mr. McEldowney.
I'm gonna ask staff. Am I on? I'm gonna ask staff to help speak to, so I don't mischaracterize it, the difference between the function of fees in this conversation and 2K revenue relative to capital and O&M, because to me they're two different things. And so I want all of us to understand, including those folks that are tuning in at a distance, the function of fees in this conversation, and then I have a couple of follow-up comments.
Roger?
Well, I can answer initially and then invite others to chime in. I think Mr. McEldowney's question is, to what extent were fees anticipated as part of the overall financial model? Certainly fees were. We did not really discuss what proportion of O&M or the debt service should be covered by fees, but certainly the financial modeling that we did at a staff level always assumed that user fees would be some component of covering overall O&M. I certainly appreciate the comments that have been made, though. Given our situation, given the 2K tax increase, we have a direct funding source to help subsidize those operations, and so we do have an ability to sort of tinker with fees, perhaps more so than other communities are able to do. But as I recall, fees and charges were always somewhere in the mix in terms of the overall financial model for operating the new facilities once we got them built and opened.
So is it fair to say then that holding these fees flat over time puts a greater burden on the revenues generated through 2K, limiting the amount of those revenues that can be used toward capital investment and or straight O&M?
Certainly it has an impact. As you saw in the options that we crafted for the senior rates, given the overall 2K budget and the O&M portion of the 2K budget, it's a fairly small amount. So probably there's going to be a need, perhaps after November, to have sort of a reset discussion with council about the role of fees and charges in that overall financial model. The good news is you have some flexibility there, given, again, the dedicated funding source through 2K. But at some point, if you were to take that to sort of an extreme and hold fees steady for an extended period of time, there would have to be some other adjustments made to how we're financing O&M, I think.
Okay. I guess the key, obviously we're not going to get everybody to change their mind tonight, but I do want to put this out there, because the thing that I heard in all the comments, and it doesn't sound like this was necessarily part of a deep dive discussion when you regrouped, was how to affect some level of increase while protecting the two segments of the population that what I'm hearing is everybody wants to protect, the seniors and the kids. Specifically, I didn't hear anything in the prior discussions, or it doesn't sound like there was meaningful conversation in the most recent discussion about making rec free. I know I've heard that once or twice before in the distant past, but to have that be a factor in this and not have had meaningful conversation about it, to me is not so genuine, frankly. So I would suggest, since we won't solve it tonight, and we're going to apparently hold these fees flat, the conversation that needs to happen after November is, what is a number that staff is trying to achieve in terms of an increase, right? How much do we want to increase fees by relative to what we would have done here? And what are the different ways that we can do that, right? I don't hear anybody having an issue with corporate, right, or adult. So the increases in each of those cases, as they stand, are still less than all of our peer communities. So do you nudge those up a little bit more? What are the dials that we need to turn in order to achieve some level of added discount or price protection for the segments that you're interested in? I just have a really hard time with saying, nope, we're going to hold them where they're at, as opposed to having a more thorough conversation about how do we increase the revenue via fees with a heads up on how do we protect the people in that formula that we want to protect. And it seems like we're just sort of jumping to I don't want to change fees. And so that is what it is. Then I sadly won't be able to weigh in when this gets brought back.
All right, I'm going to say a couple of things about what I think about how these fees work. What I'm gathering from the council isn't that they're unwilling to raise the fees. I think my opinion, and it's my opinion only, is that the council is hesitant to change the fees because of the timing. We've had this division, this north-south type division for many, many years, and the last thing that we want to do is create more of an emphasis that there's a divide between the south and the north. We don't want to raise the fees just because a rec center is going up north, and I think that's the feeling I'm getting from this council. I absolutely will not have any problem at all in the future of considering increasing the fees because the cost of living, everything's going up, and the cost of doing business is going up, and our fees are relatively low. And I think that needs to be considered in a timely manner, but not at a time where we can cause more divide in our city. We need, and I'm hearing one thing from the council and I'm feeling something else, and it's we want to pull both ends of the community together and not show a divide. The last thing we want is people up north going, oh, now the fees went up because there's a rec center up here, and that's not the intent. And that's what I'm feeling. So I'm also agreeing with Jason. We have to take a serious look at the fees. I'm not going to sit here and debate what the council's already said. There's a consensus of you have enough information now from the council members that have spoken that the fees for the youth will stay the same. And I think it's very important, though, that you get it on the calendars to bring this back up to the new council when the time's right. I just think we need to get this rec center opened up and let it operate and make sure that people understand that all services are going to be equitable for our residents no matter where you live. Are we moving on now? Go ahead, Brian.
We understand council's direction on child and youth. Is there a need to have a further discussion about the senior resident rates, or am I to understand the council's direction is to leave that flat as well?
Well, let me check.
Okay.
Mr. Douglas, what do you think about the senior piece?
Well, I know there's 5 options. Can you put those 5 options up there on the screen?
Yeah, so if I can just walk you through those, if you don't mind.
You know what? It probably will help because otherwise we'll get into a discussion. So go ahead.
Okay. So the first option is basically for seniors 62 to 79, it would be $125 per year, and then the gold card would be for 80 plus. And so that's the division there. The footnote there is that the senior resident, again 62 or older, would be given the opportunity to purchase a membership at the current rate through the end of 2018. So that gives them a year and almost 6 months, 5 months to purchase at the current rate. Then the second option is basically the same type of approach, except the seniors 62 to 79 would be able to purchase the annual pass at $62.50, and then the gold card for 80 plus would be at $31.25, but no option to purchase in advance at the current rate. Third option is just simply all seniors 62 and over would be able to purchase the annual pass at $50, and the footnote there is that all seniors can request the $50 from the Good Friends Scholarship Program. That applies currently to any of these scenarios, so it's just basically a help here. So it would offset and leave it at zero in effect for those in need of financial assistance. Option 4, 62 and older, would be a stair-step process where you go 24 in 2018, $48 in 2019, $96 in 2020, and $125 in 2021. Fifth option is slight variation on that, and that would be any senior 62 or older would be able to purchase it at the current rate of $12 through 2018, and then it would double each year after that until in 2022 it would reach $125. So, you know, different flavors, but basically stair-stepping this type of approach.
And in all 5 cases, they're just options that we tried to put together based on some of the discussion we heard previously. And it's just intended to get your discussion going, not that you have to pick one of those, but it's just to help you have a good, thoughtful discussion about it.
Can you remind us what the current rate is?
$12 for senior currently. And let me go to the next slide. So this is based on our current recreation center, Eagle Point, and this shows the financial impact at Eagle Point Recreation Center for these different scenarios. So you can see it's pretty tough because it's very light and my laser is not dark enough to really show up, but that's the current revenue in 2016. It resulted in $264,000 of revenue, which, by the way, is about 23 to 26% of the overall cost of the program. And then the proposal is the second column, and that was at $367,000 estimated. So that would have meant $102,000 more for the one recreation center. And then from there, the third column is, thank you, a real pointer. So third column is basically with no increase to resident, child, and youth. That would make about a $13,000 difference, you can see. And then revenue for the option 1 senior center, slightly less than what was proposed, because what was proposed was $367,000. This would result in $352,000. And so, again, slightly less. But, again, it's $88,000 more than the 2016 revenue. And so then second option, $334,000. Third option, $331,000. Fourth option, $323,000. Fifth option, $320,000. So very similar. So this is the impact of both recreation centers. You can see that option 1 would be $176,000 more than the 2016 revenue, and then option 2 would be $140,000 more. Option 3, $134,000. Option 4, $118,000. Option 5, $111,000.
And one additional footnote, the revenue projections that Cheryl covered when we started the meeting today assume no increases to the fees. So we baked into the initial revenue projections for 18, holding those fees flat. So any changes you make here results in additional revenue. Another way of saying it is you don't have to adjust these fees for us to craft a balanced budget. We've built in sort of holding them flat.
All right. Can you put all the options back up there, and I'll go around to the council. All right, Mr. Douglas.
I'd say I know we have to increase in the future. I like just to keep it as it is and come back in November and to talk about the senior rate.
Councilman Elliott?
I would be interested in option 4.
Okay. Mr. McEldowney?
I don't have enough information to get into nuancing a proposal specific to seniors without looking at the entire program. I think it's silly to sit here and try and hip shoot on let's protect this and let's not protect that, or let's set some sort of a growth fee increase over time without looking at the fee structure comprehensively. So I'm going to defer to the post-November conversations and let you guys pick this back up at that time. I will just footnote that I think the thing that needs to be considered in this is if we just look at these numbers on this page, we don't have any sense of how many individuals that touches, right? And so it could be 10, it could be 500. And that's a very different impact depending on how many people we're talking about. And so I think it's important that for the folks that are here when this gets picked back up again, these conversations take into account actual population impact. So, and I think we started to get there in one of the earlier conversations. How many kids today are using the rec center, and what fee are they paying, right? I don't think, if my memory serves, that the increases were as onerous across the board as they're being made out to be, but we're past the point of being able to have that conversation without other details. So I'm going to say I'm not going to weigh in.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I could interject just a couple things that might help the discussion. One is that in terms of children who attend the recreation center without parents, it's less than 10 per year. So that's why it's such a nominal impact on revenue for the youth or the child. In terms of the senior population, the last time the count was done, it was 335 that were 62 or older. So again, not a large population, but it has more significant impact on the revenue. In terms of timing, we have basically two options we outlined for you that would take, basically implement the fees sometime in 2018. But again, those are two options. There are other options. So I think it would be more critical for us to know what your intent is on the eventual fee rather than worry about the timing. And then when we get to the timing, talk about timing, when to implement the basic program or recreation fees. The facility rental fees we're proposing to have go into effect January 1 of 2018, whereas the other fees, the admission fees, would basically go with the cycle of the what do you call it, the publication that goes out, and implement either in August, for an example, or December would be another option of 2018. So if that helps.
Okay. Mr. Bullock.
In looking at the different options, the option that I could just actually get on was option 5. Now, I looked at option 3 where it said that all seniors can request the $50. Do all seniors get the $50 scholarship, good neighbor good friend scholarship if they request it?
Carolyn is indicating yes.
Okay, so if everybody paid $50 and everybody asked for the good friend scholarship, basically it zeroes it out. So, when you look at seniors' income is a little bit different. A lot of them are on fixed income. A lot of them depend on everyday occurrences. If Social Security is going to go up this year, if it's going to go down, what's going to happen? Do they stay flat? A lot of them don't have debit cards because of the fact that they're either managed by somebody else or they're afraid that somebody will hack their account and they won't have any money left. So that's why I look at the stair step. I will not be here in the years in the future, but looking at this, just option 5, it says senior 62. Those are resident seniors, correct? Why weren't we shown an option of non-resident seniors 62 and up? Because that could be income that could actually offset this, where it made it better on the ones that weren't grandfathered, made it better on our residents, that it would they would take up the slack. Say a whole bunch of people from Brighton and Northland and Thornton decide they like our new rec center better. Using a non-resident fee to offset that, we could always keep our residents at a flat rate for a certain length of time and then let them know, this is coming in the future. Here are options you could do. But it seems like we're getting half of the story, and that really irritates me because there is a whole different sector of seniors that use the rec center that aren't grandfathered in, like the George Maxey's and stuff that just come here, that come to our rec center on interim basis and use it when they're in the area. But option 5 would be my option, and I need to get off my soapbox right now.
If I could just respond to Mayor Pro Tem Bullock's question, we did present all of the fees previously, and we only brought back tonight those where there didn't seem to be agreement. So we understood there was consensus on the non-resident senior rates, but you make a good point. If you're going to sort of adjust the dial up or down on the senior resident rate, you can absolutely go back to that senior non-resident rate and make an adjustment there too. We just tried to simplify the issues tonight and bring back those where we didn't sense that council was in agreement with the fees that were initially proposed by staff. But we could pull that information back up tonight without any problem.
The budget will be over by then. I mean, don't do it for me. Do it for the council next year that'll be sitting here.
Mr. Teeter.
Okay. There we are. Yes, I'm going to agree with a little bit what Renee said here. I like 5, and I like to make sure that any non-residents people that are going to use our rec center, that all those fees are raised higher.
Councilman Carson.
I'm going to go with Jason because of the fact that I agree. When we're looking at those options, I don't have a clue what I'm looking at. Did our senior population increase in its use by 2 times? Did it increase by 100 times? I have no clue. I don't know what that use is going to be when we have the new rec center opened and when we remodel this one. What I do know is in that June presentation, it said person 65 years and over in our demographic information. We were talking about 5.8% is what the information that we were given. So I'm not sure that this makes that big of a difference to us as a recreation center, but I do feel that it could make a huge difference to seniors within our community. If you're talking a couple, that's $250 a month or a year, to where it was $24. Also into this presentation, there's information says that it's on the AARP research, and it's basing that information on individuals 50 plus. So I don't think it's very fair to compare a 50-year-old to a 65-year-old. 65-year-old is truly on a fixed income. It says about this population and the wealth that a 50-year-old holds. Well, we're not talking about 50-year-olds. We're talking about 62 and up. So I will tell you, as a member of that Parks and Rec Advisory, one of our members said, well, I based my vote on because of this AARP, and it was said to us that seniors in our have more disposable income. So that really is not very thoughtful thinking, because it's very easy to read here that it says 50 plus. This says 62 and up. So I don't have information to vote. I'm hesitant. This rec center has not even opened the doors. We have no clue what we're looking at. You know, I'm trying to raise rates on something. I don't know what it's going to be, and I'm not comfortable with that. It also says that persons under 18 years of age in that June study session was 33%. So when we talk about these 2 age groups, like I said, these are the 2 age groups that, as far as building this, what we call this quality community for a lifetime, I believe it's those 2 age groups that really, really have a role in that. And what does it look like if our youth are at the rec center instead of somewhere else? The 8 years that I've sat here, and I know every counselor has heard exactly the same that I have, there is nothing to do in the city if you're a youth. So I definitely do not want to do something that would outprice our youth, that would make residents feel that we're taking advantage of a certain population. So, you know, until we open these doors and we see what's going on, and I'm not against raising rates, and I'm not against us sitting here and raising certain rates, non-residents, because this is about our residents, not our non-residents. So I'm very open to looking at that. I'm very open to looking at what program fees are, what rental fees are. It's just these yearly rates for our citizens.
Mr. Diaz.
I think my feelings and my position on this particular topic is the same as the child and youth one, where I would prefer to keep things the same and wait till after November. I side with Councilman McEldowney and Councilwoman Carson on this. We don't have enough information to make a decision moving forward based off of that. And again, I'm also not opposed to it. It's just I don't think it's time right now.
Well, I'm gonna side with Mr. Councilman McEldowney and Mr. Douglas, Mr. Diaz, Councilwoman Carson on holding this over, and let's get the rec center open, and let's have some data to point to as to what increases would be beneficial for operations and what whether that would be in our non-resident, and we just don't know yet. We're building brand new facilities. Let's get them open and see where things are at before we start making adjustments, and that hopefully gives staff some clear direction for tonight.
We understand, and we'll make sure to proceed with that direction. And again, the good news that I mentioned before is the revenue that we included in building this base budget is the revenue estimate of the revenue that we're currently receiving based on current rates. So it doesn't make the rest of the decisions you need to make tonight more difficult. So we will proceed with that direction and move on with the next subject.
Well, to clarify, all of the other fees, you're okay with proceeding on, correct? Because those are in the budget. It's just these three, youth, child, and senior, that is not in the budget.
From my understanding, if council or any of you have any concerns with any of the other fees, speak now or forever hold your peace, because they're going to change other than these three that we pointed out. Councilwoman Carson.
Are we accepting, I don't remember seeing anywhere where the rental fees and such were in here for. That's done?
That was back in that June study session.
Right.
I believe
Okay.
we talked about rental fees.
We talked about it, but was it approved?
Yeah, we did it.
It's done? Okay.
There
All
were
right.
fees proposed at that time, and not hearing specific objections, those were carried forward into the draft resolution that council was to approve 2 or 3 weeks ago.
In other words, they would be, the prior conversation allowed those to move forward within the consideration.
Yes.
And they would be approved as part of the budget.
That was our understanding.
Regardless, because of the discussion tonight, we'll be bringing back to council a formal action to approve the fees and charges. So if we've misheard you in some way, there's still an opportunity to make that adjustment or make that correction before council formally approves the fees.
It's much better, though, for the staff tonight, since we're doing the budget, to try to help vet this out. If you have concerns about it, now's the time to really bring it up and get it dealt with.
I just need some good clarification. So we are going to go forward with the adult resident increase fee, is that correct? And all the non-resident?
All of the fees as proposed will change, other than the three that we discussed tonight of not increasing.
Just to clarify, let's pull up the full.
Thank you.
Perfect.
This is the daily. What I don't see on the annual membership slide is the family membership rates. I didn't see that. Do we have that we can pull up? I think it might be worthwhile to circle back on the family resident to make sure council is in agreement with that one.
And I was gonna ask a question. Now, this monthly fee automatic debit, if the person doesn't have a debit card and they aren't automatically debited and it's going to be totally different than this 312 or 390. If they, this is showing if it's automatically debit. Is it going to be the same if they aren't an automatic debit?
Yes.
Okay. And this is in Recreation's purview, but this isn't with fees. I was at Paradise Park yesterday, and a lady came in with a service dog. And the staff allowed, service dogs, this and that. Service dogs aren't allowed to swim with the people, are they? She got in the water with her service dog. This is why I'm saying, and I got totally upset, and I went and told staff, I don't care what kind of service dog it is. It ain't a swimming service dog, and if she needs it to swim, she needs to go someplace else because everybody got out of the water when the dog got in.
Give us an opportunity to review that specific situation with respect to ADA.
Okay. Point 2. I rented a cabana, and at no point when you rent a cabana does it say that you rent the cabana, but everybody pays to get in otherwise. It was, I guess it was my fault, because I assumed because I was renting the cabana that the fee was on closed, that everybody was charged separately to come in. And I don't know if it's happened to any other council people. I know it happened to JD.
Every time I've been there, my guests have to.
Okay, but did you know that ahead of time, the first time you rented the cabana?
It says it on the information that I pulled up that they have to pay.
Okay, I was just, I acted like I knew to the rest of the people that were with me, but I did not have that information in hand. But I told them, oh yeah, we just rented the cabana, you had to pay for yourself. But I did not know that, so I was just blowing smoke up somebody else's swimsuit. But the dog thing really got to me, and quite frankly, if it was her service dog, and we can't even ask them that, why was she letting it just walk around the place? I mean, it was a bunch of things, but the staff wasn't going to mess with her because that puts you in line for a lawsuit if it is well, even if it isn't, just asking more questions than you're allowed to ask about service dogs. And I told them that I would bring it up today in council, but it was one of the things that just, you would not believe how many people got out of water when she got in with a dog,
Jason.
I just want to ask a clarifying question on the monthly fee. There's been suggestion that this is dependent on having a debit card. Most of the recurring payment options that I'm familiar with allow for the use of either a debit card or a checking account number and routing number. So if I am someone who chooses not to leverage a debit card, then when I establish a program like this, it simply is a matter of defining my checking account number and my routing number and a date, and then those funds are withdrawn directly from that account periodically, right? That's a fairly standard approach for this, so it actually would fit in terms of a budget-minded individual's long-term planning. I know I get a check on this time of month, it's for this amount. I know I'm going to have a debit of this amount for my rec center membership. I think it's important to confirm that, and I saw some heads nodding, and that seems to be the case. So, thank you.
Mr. Douglas.
Yes. This is around, I know later on we're going to get into city manager recommendations for outcome on the areas, which is later on in the presentation that has to deal with the recreational proposed new positions.
Let's get through the fees first.
Okay, well, we're on rec center, so I'll bring that back.
We're on fees. We'll
Okay.
get to the rec center staff piece in a minute, but we got to close out the fee thing so we can move to the next item. But bring it up when we get to the staff piece, Steve.
Okay. Okay, because this has to deal with the book, too, that's coming out. first part of December. So
Yeah.
that's why I want to tie that in.
It does to the extent that those fee increases that take effect January 1st, which at this
All right.
point is just the facility rental fees.
Okay.
The other
Thank you.
fees we've contemplated, whatever increases council's contemplating, we've suggested that those fee increases would take effect either in August or December of 18, whichever is council's
Yeah,
preference.
so we've got about a year before any increases other than the facility rate. Councilwoman Carson?
I'm really sorry. I was absent from that study session in June. That's when I had that mouth surgery done. Can you explain to me corporate? So what does that include, this corporate fee? It's not showing there. I'm looking at the individual annual membership that was presented during study session.
The corporate fee applies to any individual that works in a business here in Commerce City but may not be a Commerce City resident. They don't own or live in the city, but they work in the city.
So I'm still very confused. So they would pay that instead of the non-resident fee? Yes. Okay. And so if there was 15 employees there wasn't a one-time fee for that. All of them had to pay an individual. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions concerning the fees? Councilwoman Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been gnawing at me since I piped up and said option 4. And I think it was because I was looking at, mathematically, it seemed like it would be doable. But I'm just, initially I said keeping the fees the same. And again, I think if I had understood it correctly, that there was one point in time that there was going to be kind of like a promotion, if you will, that we would allow residents to just get more information as far as the programs and whatnot. So that's just for the record, just for the fact that I jumped on that and I said, that doesn't seem right. It's doubling every year, and then that increment from 2020 to 2021 is only a small increase of $29. And so I'm just going to go back on what I said, and I do think we just need more information. But I think we need the resident buy-in. I think we need to have that opportunity to be able to purchase the membership at that introductory price and then go forward from there. So,
Well, the
thank you.
good thing is, none of the fees will change until
Right.
August to December next year.
Right.
And we haven't decided on the youth or the senior resident components yet. So they will stay the same until a decision is made.
Right.
So I think we're good up to that. Now, Councilwoman Carson.
I would remove the corporate rate and say they would just have to pay non-resident fee.
Does anybody else feel that we should remove the corporate
When I
rate?
look at the comparable cities.
Why?
No, yeah, that's,
It-
I disagree with that. I'll explain to you why. Because Salute has a corporate rate, and they have a lot of their doctors and nurses that come over here doing and you make, as long as they know they have a corporate rate, they come over here, and that money doesn't seem to, if they were paying individually, I don't think a lot of them would want to come over because they feel like they aren't getting that neighborhood, that they're part of the city rate that they're in. There's about 7 other businesses I know that the guys could play basketball at noon and everything, and because they're corporate citizens, they feel like the trucking companies, they come over here, and I think that given a corporate rate to make it feel like the company pays for a card, and the guys can just check out the card, and they know they're getting a better rate than if they were paying that $3.90, and it gives them an incentive to want to buy cards, 5 or 7 of them, instead of the rest. These guys coming over on their own. Because if they were coming over on their own, they wouldn't come over and pay up to $3.90 to play basketball and stuff 3 times a week. So I think the corporate rate should stay in to show that we honor them as much as they like honoring us.
All right, let me go back to what my ask was. Does anybody else on council feel we need to do away with the corporate rate? Mr. Douglas.
Before I answer that, I have a question for Carolyn. Carolyn, could you tell us how many participants we have for corporate rates as far as companies? Thank you.
So I'm not hearing overwhelming support to remove the corporate rate, so we will leave it in. I did ask staff to pull this slide back up from a prior presentation because the prior presentation did contemplate some increases for the family membership rates, both resident and non-resident. We do understand from council discussion a desire to keep the individual child, individual youth, individual senior resident rates the same in 18. But is there consensus that these fees we showed previously are agreeable, or is there a desire to lower the increase for the resident family memberships, or even hold those flat as well and make those resident rates part of that broader discussion late this year or next year?
Let me get through the corporate piece, and then we'll talk about this, and I'll ask council if they have any desire to change anything else.
In 2016, there were 28 corporate individual memberships sold.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Douglas.
On the corporate rate, just being 28, that's not very many. So I just say keep it as it is.
Okay. Anyone, again, have any desire to do away with the corporate rate? Seeing none, let's talk about the family annual membership. Does anybody have any desire to manipulate or change any of the proposed increases that will go into effect August to December of 2018 for family membership? Seeing none. Councilwoman Carson.
Are we talking resident, non-resident?
All of it.
All of it. I would like to go back to the board and look at the non-resident fees.
Okay.
Do we have the ability of pulling up the non-resident?
Family? The family or just individual non-resident?
Oh,
All
sorry.
non-resident.
They're all there. Yeah, you're right.
Well, there's the family non-resident there. Current and proposed.
They all increase.
They all increase. Non-resident, 4-person, 2-person, and the resident with additional child.
Quick note, we're trying to turn off the alarm here. It might go off.
Good. Now I don't feel so bad.
Success.
Do you have the information you need, Councilman?
I'm good with whatever council wants to go towards, I guess, as long as we're not putting our youth and seniors on here.
Yeah, youth and senior is
It-
not, youth and senior individual memberships are not part of any changes, and the changes that will be happening will not occur until August to December of next year.
I guess I was trying to find Denver's, but evidently Denver does not have a 4-person or a 2-person
Family.
non-resident family. Okay.
And those comparisons were actually in the presentation relative to other communities. So, I mean, again, I think we're talking ourselves in circles.
Again, I want to say this one more time. I think we need to get these facilities, after they're built and redone, open and operating, and understand what our clientele is and what that client base is, and make accurate information and changes based on the information that we have that's factual instead of guessing. And so I'm looking forward to that discussion in a year. But the fees that we have that are changing, from what I'm hearing from the council, you have clear direction, and we'll move forward and we'll see those changes next year, August to December.
A quick question about that. There is an option there. The Recreation Program Guide is published in early August or early December. So to the extent that there are fee increases, when do you want them to take effect? At the time of publication of the Fall Guide in early August, or the Winter Guide in early December?
Let me find out. Mr. Douglas,
Yes.
do you want the fee changes to occur during the Fall Guide in August of 18 or in the Winter Guide of December of 18?
The winter guide.
Winter.
Councilman Elliott. Winter? Mr. McEldowney? August, okay,
I would say August.
okay. Paula? Winter. JD?
August.
All right, looks like August. All right, any other discussion on recreation center fees before we move on? Moving on.
Slightly off topic, but still with PRG fees, is the Paradise Island Pool. You had talked about possibly visiting the non-resident fee for the pool. We have some information we could present to you today, or do you want to have us bring it back to you at a study session?
You know what? Since we're in here dealing with it, that one, to me, there's more factual evidence of who's been using it, how busy it's been, and I am concerned that our residents aren't getting a fair opportunity because it's always maxed out. Are our resident fees high enough? So I would prefer you present the information to the council.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and walk through this? I don't know this information.
So we went back and took a look at the 2016 numbers. So what you have in the first column, 2016, our resident daily admission, you can see the number of 10,462. The group admissions were 7,800. The non-resident, 23,737, and a little over 2,000 with the group. The next column is 2017. This is through August 15th, so this is not the entire season, but it gives you an idea, and I would say we're trending similar to what we were in 2016. Daily admission currently with resident, 9,500, group admission, 6,400, and with the non-resident at 21,600 and 1,800 for the group. Now, the one caveat I want to share with you regarding the non-resident, if you do not have an identification card, you could be a Commerce City resident and you pay the non-resident rate. And we have some folks that don't want to get that identification card, so they just pay the non-resident. We have no idea of knowing how many of those. So that total for the non-resident may also include some residents, but I think you should see those numbers before you then look at the fees. So if we can go back to that first slide. And we were not, because council had made some comments about non-resident rates, we did some comparison of non-resident rates to other agencies with similar type amenities to Paradise Island. And the one thing that I would tell you with Inglewood's Pirates Cove, that's their Monday through Thursday rate, so their non-prime time rate. their week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is higher.
All right. I'm going to go back to the council and ask what you think is your perspective on the Feast for Paradise. Mr. McEldown.
So there are a couple of assumptions that I'm hearing and have heard council refer to in terms of Paradise Island, the sense that we have residents being turned away because the facility is full. So if we can go back to the prior slide, I want to clarify. These are visitor numbers on this page?
Yes, they're the actual daily or the total.
So clearly we have more non-residents than residents, or at least as tracked, because they're not displaying an identification, right? We don't know that that's truly a non-resident or resident. Do we have any sense that if we were to increase the fee, we would turn people away or enable more residents to attend? Because that sounds like the only reason people want to talk about the fee. So do we have any data that tells us what we expect a changing fee to non-residents to do in terms of outcome?
We don't have any data. All we know is that we have been told occasionally by non-residents that this is the best deal in town for the type of amenity. I do think potentially we may get a better handle on resident, non-resident use. If you raise the fee, it may also encourage folks to get their identification card to pay the resident rate. But again, we don't have any factual data.
Right. Totally agree. So I guess the key to me is the theme of this retreat, right? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? I do think there is a sense of assessing a competitive fee for the amenity relative to other facilities, right? And if we're the cheapest deal in town and it's a good facility, does that start to have an impact in terms of wear and tear on a facility because we're seeing greater volumes and we're not offsetting the potential wear and tear? So I'm absolutely open to the increase. I do think that we need to understand what the various hurdles are to people getting an identification card. Is it because they are not able to do the identification card at the pool and they have to go somewhere else to get it done?
They can get an identification card at the pool. It's more convenient at the recreation center. In some cases, folks just don't want to provide the information.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, if folks want to stay anonymous, then that's their option. I just want to be clear on what we're trying to achieve and not just throw numbers out there. So the proposed increases seem appropriate to me. I'll leave it at that.
Let me go around. Mr. Douglas.
Yeah, I agree with the fees. I like the increase.
Okay. Councilman Elliott.
I would agree with the fees as proposed.
Thank you. Mr. Bullock.
Okay. There were a lot of people yesterday that came straight from church to the pool for their cabana thing, and they weren't swimming, they weren't going to do anything. You could tell that they weren't swimming. They did not have on anything that was swimwear, bow ties, suits, and stuff like this, but they came to celebrate somebody's birthday. When you know that somebody isn't going to use it, you've already paid for the cabana, and you know they aren't going to give you water, they aren't going to be a part of that usage, why are we charging them to sit in a cabana? I understand the fact there, but me being me, I went to the different cabanas on either side, and I talked to the people and asked them where they were from, and we had a lot of Denver residents there that were fully dressed, but they paid to get in, not to do anything except sit, eat in their cabana that was already paid for. I can understand raising the fees and everything, but if you know somebody isn't going to use your have any usage with the water whatsoever, are we still gonna charge him that same, adult $10 when they could be charged $3.50 instead, not to use, if you know they're gonna get in there, am I making sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand the point you're making. I don't know how easy it would be to track that sort of usage. And I think it does ultimately impact total capacity of the facility.
Okay. Well, I would say leave the fees at it. Another thing, put the picture of your council people in both of the box offices so they know that the people that really don't have to pay, where you don't get into an argument with the lady telling her, no, I don't have to pay, and she's telling you, yes, everybody had to pay. I paid too, but I didn't have to pay. As a council person, we get that after you've been there 5 years, that's usage that goes along with our golf recreation center usage. Or did they change that also and didn't tell us? Because I know that
We'll address that, Renee. We'll address that. The council policy hasn't changed, but hopefully council has their identification cards that you can show when you go to the facilities, but we'll address it.
Okay, I just,
All right, I'm gonna finish surveying the council on if they're okay with the proposed fee changes for Paradise Island. Mr. Amador.
I'm good.
You're good with the new proposed changes? Okay, Mr. Teeter?
Yes.
Councilman Carson?
Well, I hate to be difficult, but the youth.
Of course you do.
It's this group rate that I think should be raised. So we're talking when you're there and you see these buses pull in and 30 kids, right? That's what we're talking about, is that it was a group rate that they purchased for X amount of.
You see it up there now?
Well, it was.
In answer to Ms. Carson's question,
Well,
that's
I'm
the
talking
rate
the dollar
a group
amount.
of kids
so
would pay?
yeah. So go back to the annual, the fee. There you go. So I guess that we're proposing if you come in with a group as a non-resident, it's $5. But if you came in as a non-resident without a group, it's $8. And I think that should, I would raise the group fee from the 5.
Okay. Mr. Diaz?
I agree with the fee increases.
I also agree with the fee increases as proposed, and I would ask that the Parks and Rec and Golf Department continue to monitor the fees and what the participation levels are, so you could come back with changes if need be. Mr. McEldowney.
I was just going to comment to Ms. Carson. The groups oftentimes are your the daycare. When Maggie was at aftercare, or not aftercare, but like summer care over summer, you've got a group of kids who are coming in. So I don't know.
I don't know
we
what
we could argue
Yeah,
every
that's
single
fine.
rate in this table on every single page, and there could be an argument made to increase, decrease, hold flat, or otherwise. And
I
I'm
guess
not-
I don't know what a group is and how you apply for that group. And
So let's ask
if
the
it's a
question.
school tour group, I
Right.
fully understand that. If I'm a daycare, or if I'm grandma and I want to bring my 15 grandkids, is that a group? I mean, I don't.
Carolyn, can you
I think we have to
answer what a
ask that in the
group
form
is?
of a question, not an assumption, right? So,
Right.
if that's what we want to do, is have an understanding of the definition of each of these, and let's do it. Otherwise, let's just let the fees go and have a fee discussion later. I just
Well, Maggie would have. I know. It's all very
my
confusing.
sense is it's a
and-
formal group based on prior conversations.
So correct. I would say the general definition of group in regards to these statistics are organized, such as our own camp groups, our own camp groups, summer camp groups, when we take groups of kids there, or other agencies. We may have groups coming from Reunion, Bell Creek, or organized, and we do have some school groups or other groups that come from outside of the city. And you can see from the 2016 numbers and the current 17, the non-resident group piece is lowering. We're also working on we control the number we approve to come in, so we hopefully manage the experience for everyone.
And Carolyn, just to clarify, if a group of kids has residents and non-residents, the resident kids in that group would pay the resident rate?
Typically, the group also applies to when you rent the cabana. It's not just, I decide to get 10 people together and come to the pool today. So it's either an organized group or associated with a rental.
Oh,
But if
but
that
then
group-
I'm good, if that's what we're figuring it on.
But if that group contains a mixture of residents and non-residents, what happens?
Well, I'm going to tell you, if they're in our summer camp program, we would treat them all as residents. So I would say if the organization is a resident organization, we would treat all the kids. We're not going to try to go in and figure that out.
So you're good with the changes? Councilwoman
Yes.
All right, is there any other discussion to be had by the council on the proposed Paradise Island non-resident fee increases? Seeing none, we're moving on in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next topic for us to share with you tonight are some proposed changes to how we purchase vehicles in our fleet. I had mentioned at the top of the meeting today that it does have an impact based on what we're recommending in how the overall sources and uses in the budget shakes out. So we did include some slides in the presentation, and Troy Smith is going to walk through those.
Thank you, Brian. In the future, let's see, can you catch me up? Procurement? Oh, I got it. There we go. The city manager intends to bring you a contract to review for procuring our vehicles under a new methodology. Currently, we purchase and own our fleet in the city, a capital purchase model. And what you're going to hear from us today is a consideration of a change to that to a lease purchase option of our fleet. And we'll walk you through some of the advantages of that and what it does from a cost-saving standpoint for us to make that change. This procurement method would not apply to any specialized equipment, most specialized equipment, and doesn't apply to any of our heavy equipment. So this lease purchase option that we're speaking with you about is what we would typically refer to as our white fleet, pickup trucks and cars that are used on a day-to-day basis, but not snow plows and street sweepers and that kind of equipment. I also should mention, if you lease a vehicle in your personal life and you know how leases work, this is a government lease, and it's a little bit different than what you would have as a personal vehicle lease. And I'll try to point some of those out as we go through the presentation. So why would we be considering doing this? 61% of our fleet today is older than 5 years old. And so vehicles that are older than 5 years old have not kept up with technology related to safety. Their fuel economy typically is less than a newer vehicle. They don't have the newest safety standards that are available. Certainly our cash flow position would improve based upon this change. You only pay for the portion of the vehicle that you're using during the lease period, as opposed to paying for the depreciation of the entire vehicle. There are lower maintenance costs associated with newer vehicles, and when they're replaced in a more timely manner, you certainly gain more value of those vehicles at sale, and that is really where the advantage of this process would come in. You really leverage the depreciation cost of the vehicle and sell the vehicle at a maximum value proposition. None of the changes that we would be talking about here would have a reduction in any staffing out of our fleet division. Our fleet division would maintain its existing staffing levels, and they would be providing maintenance on these leased vehicles. That maintenance would mostly consist of oil changes and preventative maintenance.
any significant maintenance on the leased vehicles would go back to the manufacturer under its vehicle's warranty. And then the fleet division would really focus their attention on providing maintenance to our heavy equipment. These are a few of the safety changes in the automobile industry over a period of time. We do have some vehicles in the fleet that are 2007. Those vehicles, of course, wouldn't have anti-lock brakes or airbags in most cases. The 2012, you have stability control and lane departure, rear videos required. These are all reasons, safety features that would be added to the newer vehicles if they were in our fleet. This is a picture of our historical fleet budgeting over the last several years. And in 2017, we have $2,094,000 in our existing budget to buy vehicles for replacement in 2017. I will explain in a minute. Our proposal is to begin by taking care of 2017 and 2018 vehicles through this lease purchase auction. These funds all come out of our fleet retained earnings account. And here is the dollars and cents portion of this lease or capital purchase process. The top box shows you in 2017 we had 33 vehicles to replace. The maintenance on those vehicles is $236,000. The annual one-time aftermarket cost is the equipment that we add to those vehicles once they get here. Things like light bars on police cars and radios, those sorts of things. There are a certain number of vehicles that we, as I mentioned, we would not lease. So in that $557,000 cost, for example, is a street sweeper that Maria is looking at purchasing right now. That would be still done under the capital purchase model. And the outlay in 17 under this lease model would be $880,000 to lease a portion of our fleet and purchase some specialty equipment versus what was approved in the 2017 budget, which is in the bottom box. Same 33 vehicles. We budgeted $2 million, and we would spend that $2 million. If we do the lease purchase option above, in 2017 we would save $1.2 million from capital outlay just in that year alone. And in 2018, we would save for 36 vehicles $847,000. And so that money would stay in fleet retained earnings so that we could continue to keep our fleet and our rolling stock maintained, with the exception of this year's budget. The city manager is recommending to you that $1.2 million be transferred from the fleet fund into the general fund budget to accomplish a number of things that we will be presenting to you. So in other words, that $1.2 million is already in the numbers that you see. If you were to tell us that you didn't want to do this lease purchase option, we would have to back some of that money back out of the budget for 2018. Take questions in just a moment. Just real quickly, we spoke to a number of vendors who do this kind of thing, and we've really focused our conversation with Enterprise Fleet Management. Enterprise is a member of Cooperative Purchasing through a service called TIPS. So they have gone through a competitive bid process that satisfies our procurement policy, and that contract and contracting price that has already been bid out is available to us as a governmental entity and satisfies our procurement, which is why we really have focused on them. They also have some pretty significant advantages. There's some data about their company, some references. A number of governmental entities right here in our region have begun doing this. The Denver Police Department is not using them for their marked patrol vehicles. They're using them for all their other vehicles. Under the proposal that we have entertained with them, they actually would be doing our police vehicles on the lease. We would be maintaining those vehicles, but they would deliver us an upfitted police car. They're also doing that for the city of Fountain and a couple other cities that are doing both police and marked and unmarked cars. They have a full menu of services that they offer to municipalities and government customers. The ones that are bolded here are the ones that staff is recommending that we would take advantage of. So we would use Enterprise for acquisition. We would do our lease financing through them, so we make an annual lease payment to them for all those 33 vehicles I showed you. We would continue to do our own maintenance and our own fuel. We would use them for vehicle resale, and this is one of the strategic advantages of Enterprise. Again, when they sell over 1 million vehicles a year nationwide, they are not giving us back wholesale price on the sale of that vehicle. They're selling it at full retail value, and that is a huge dollar savings. They actually showed us a couple of examples where government entities bought a vehicle at a severely discounted price because they're a government agency, and at the time they sold that vehicle 24 months later, they sold it for more than they paid for it. After using the car for 2 years, they got more out of it than what they paid for it. Aftermarket customization, that's, again, the upfit on the police cars. That's, perhaps snow plows on a parks truck. It's equipment that we install after the fact. They deliver these vehicles titled, licensed, registration in them. They're really ready to go when they get here. We can choose to change those options at any time. So if we decided that we wanted to start using them to provide maintenance or fuel, we could change that option in the future. And they've already done this stuff for us that's up here. They've analyzed our existing fleet. They've given us some recommendations about what to do with that. They've let us know about selling our current fleet. All these things they've already begun engaging with us on to help us through this analysis process. The contract has gone to legal, and Mr. Sheasley has had the opportunity to take a look at that. We have incorporated the numbers again into the final budget, and right now would be the time traditionally that we would be recommending a list of vehicles for 2018 to them, and they would begin procuring and ordering those vehicles so that they would be delivered after the first of the year. We're really behind the curve for purchasing 2017's vehicles. So in this proposal, we would take both years' vehicles, deal with them both in the same contract. So the 33 vehicles and the 36 vehicles essentially would all go on at the same time. And then we would be on a normal rotation. Council would have the opportunity at every time we renewed one of these lease cycles to say yes or no to lease purchase in the future. So it does not lock us in beyond the vehicles we buy in a given year under this procurement model. With that said, I'll end my presentation, open up for any questions that you might have.
All right, does council have any questions of the staff concerning their proposed lease option for fleet? Mr. Douglas.
I would say that's those numbers look great. I appreciate the savings by going through this program. My question is, do they have flex vehicles as far as like hybrids, electric cars? Because I think we're going to be trending that way in the future with electric cars, trucks, and so are they going to have those type of options in their fleets?
Yes, in fact, the procurement that we have in 17 and in 18 has a few of those vehicles in them, and I know that it's Ms. DeAndrea's intent to attempt to deploy some of those vehicles and see how they work out as a test for providing services around the community.
Okay, because I know Aurora, they have a lot of electric cars in their fleet, and they even have electric motorcycles they have in there as well, which they're nice. I guess one of the commanders rides one around, and they call him RoboCop every time he shows up with that electric bike. So, thank you.
You bet.
Anyone else? Mr. Amador.
Is this a lease purchase or just a lease? Because you referred to selling vehicles after they've been used for a couple years. And so is it lease purchase or lease, or how is that kind of?
Yes. So at the end of the lease period, and these vehicles would all be set up on a 5-year lease, but they are not locking us into that 5 years. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that in a second. But they're all set up on a 5-year lease window. When the vehicles are sold, either at the end of the lease or before the end of the lease, the full value of the sale comes back to us. And so in the future, we would be receiving back a cash payment from them to offset the costs associated with our purchase, our lease purchase option.
Just to clarify, any additional proceeds from the sale above and beyond the residual value of that vehicle would come back to the city.
Correct.
Okay. That's my question. Thank you.
Any other questions concerning the proposed lease option? Seeing
Just
none,
one clarification I want to make. While Mr. Sheasley has received the documents and begun reviewing them, he has not given us authorization to move forward with them just yet. That's something we're still working on. That's why it's on the slide. But just a point of clarification that we're in the process of finalizing that legal review in hopes of bringing it to you for contract approval consideration in the future.
I'm okay with it. I'm interested to see what comes from the attorney's office anytime we have the opportunity to save our taxpayers some money. The other thing I would bring up is on the purchases we do have to make. Now that we have Rush Truck Centers that's carrying some of the heavier equipment that we may have a need for, and I know we have a lot of different vendors in Commerce City for snow plows and heavy equipment and things of that nature, that we continue to focus on our community for those services first before we go outside. When we do bids, try to make sure we're engaging our businesses here.
Sure. Our procurement policy that you have approved lays out a process for consideration of local businesses. So
yeah, I just want to make sure that they know those folks like Rush know that we have a bid coming up. They have the opportunity to bid. Now, if they're too high, of course we're not going to buy from them. But I want to make sure we do everything necessary to give businesses in our community the opportunity to participate. And sometimes bids go out and our local vendors don't know. So I just want to make sure that we put a focus on trying to encourage our local vendors to have the opportunity to participate in bids for equipment.
we can do that.
Thank you. Anything else? Move it forward.
I have a question for council. Dinner is here. Would you like to break now and have dinner and provide some feedback on furniture and finishes at the Bison Ridge Recreation Center, or would you like to tackle the next item first and then break?
Where are we at time-wise for our agenda?
Not sure. I would think we're not to the halfway point yet, but a lot of it depends on how much discussion there is on the remaining items on the agenda.
Next is uses of revenue.
And the first topic is Recreation Center staffing. It's actually Recreation Division staffing. It's our proposal for how to staff the Recreation Division going forward, balancing cost and service.
All right. Well, if it's fine with the council, why don't we try to take care of the new Recreation Division staffing before we break, and keep moving forward. We'll have a break after that.
Very good. So Carolyn is going to walk through, and I should say at the front end of her presentation, we spent a considerable amount of time trying to, again, balance service to the community, robust programs and services at both facilities and our other recreation programming, with trying to be cost conscious of how we spend taxpayer dollars, especially that 2K revenue on an annual basis. So this is not only Carolyn's recommendation, but it's my recommendation as well, that this strikes the right balance between cost and level of service. And so we wanted to spend some time this evening walking you through that recommendation. Again, as you know, personnel is the city manager's purview, but in this case, the personnel structure has such an impact on the budget. It seems reasonable to me to walk through it with city council, answer your questions, take feedback that you have, and incorporate any, address any concerns that you have about how we've structured it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carolyn to walk through the information that's in your packet.
Sure.
Thank you, Brian. So the purpose of this presentation will be to just provide you with a brief overview of both the Bison Ridge and Eagle Point operations and programs, the full-time staffing recommendations, and talk a little bit about our variable hour employee component. When we look at the Eagle Point Recreation Center, formerly the Commerce City Recreation Center, we're looking at a building of approximately 72,000 square feet. Our general hours of operation, Monday through Friday, 5:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Keep in mind that's the hours that the building is open to the public. We have staff showing up before and in the building after those hours, opening and closing procedures. On Saturdays and Sundays, we are open from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. to the general public. That would not include any special rental after-hour rentals. We do have those opportunities, especially with the new community room at the new recreation center or Bison Ridge. We are looking at the proposals take into consideration the staffing levels for both full-time and variable hour employees. These are the primary areas of service and programs, not intended to be all-inclusive because there are a lot of things, but these would be the primary pieces. The center control counter where you come in and are greeted by staff, all of our POS, our point of sale, admissions, program sales, aquatics, gymnastics in the weight room and fitness areas, registration, and child care. At the Bison Ridge Recreation Center, we're looking at 108,000 square feet. Again, similar general hours of operation as Eagle Point. And we're looking at full-time staff levels and variable hour, again, with the center control counter, aquatics, gym and weight room, child care, fitness, and programs. And the one piece that we don't have on this list is the gymnastics center. When you look at the recreation division, this is only the recreation division, the org chart. We have one recreation division manager, which we've given you all a hard copy, and it's a lot easier to see on your hard copy. But, we have the Recreation Division Manager who reports to, so we have the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Golf with a Recreation Division Manager who has 6 recreation supervisors, an aquatic supervisor, a recreation supervisor of operations and fitness and wellness, a facilities supervisor that oversees both recreation facilities, a recreation supervisor of athletics, a recreation supervisor of youth and teens, and a recreation supervisor of adult services and therapeutic events and therapeutic recreation and events. We currently have 6 supervisors. There were not any additional supervisors added to the recreation division with the addition of a new recreation center. The recreation supervisors are responsible for facilities or aquatics or their program area citywide. So aquatics would oversee the indoor pools at both Eagle Point and Bison Ridge, and then they're responsible for the Paradise Island outdoor. So then you get to the next level, which are the coordinators. And we have an aquatics coordinator. The N is intended for north, so we'd have an aquatics coordinator for the Bison Ridge Recreation Center. We currently have an aquatics coordinator at Eagle Point. Then you would also, we currently have a recreation coordinator responsible for all of fitness. We have a facility coordinator that would be hired for the Bison Ridge Recreation Center, and we currently have a facility coordinator at Eagle Point. When you look at athletics, we would have a recreation coordinator with adult sports, batting cages, and all of our rentals of fields. We currently have a recreation coordinator for youth sports, and we currently have a recreation coordinator that oversees dance and gymnastics. Then again, there are currently recreation coordinators for teen programs and for youth. And then we have a recreation coordinator for all of our senior and adult programs. Then the next level in our organization chart becomes our assistants. And as you can see in aquatics, we have, when I look at the coordinator level, with aquatics, the coordinator has a primary responsibility, which is either the Ridge or Eagle Point, but then they are also intended to be able to back one another up in the other coordinator's absence. When you look at the assistant positions, those are what I've referred to as the boots on the ground. They're the folks actually delivering the service to our residents. So an aquatic assistant, we have 2 aquatic assistants, what we call an AM and a PM. We have a lot of hours to cover. They also provide us with the stability of a full-time person that is on the deck at all times that helps keep the variable hour lifeguards and instructors, everything moving, especially if we have any disruption in variable hour employees showing up for shifts, then we are relying on that assistant to help with that. The same thing happens with recreation coordinator, the recreation assistants in facilities. Those are some of the familiar faces that you would have seen or recognized from Eagle Point for those of you that use the recreation center. Would have been the Celines and the Antonias. They're the full-time staff that are at that front control counter coordinating and orchestrating all of the variable hour employees and managing the rentals that come in on those daily basis. Then we have the registration assistant. For those of you, the familiar name there would be the Denise Caza. And we would have a registration assistant at each facility because we will continue to take registration at either facility. So that person, again, kind of orchestrates and leads the charge with all of the variable hour employees. But they're the boots on the ground. They're right there, the face-to-face greeting those folks. We also have built into this our building attendants, which is different from the overnight contract custodial. We currently have 2 building attendants at Eagle Point, and we have proposed 2 positions at Bison Ridge. And those are critical for the ongoing cursory maintenance throughout the day, helping us turn over rooms. There's just a lot that happens once you come in the door. The facility can be clean when we first get there, but once people start coming through the door, we have that ongoing need in restrooms, locker rooms, and as I said, setups and teardowns and just managing a lot of different people and groups that come through the front door. So in a nutshell, that's basically what or how you would look at the recreation division. We do have a new position, a new recreation assistant position in the area of gymnastics. We are almost doubling our gymnastics space, and we already have a large gymnastics program. We've got a number of variable hour employees and coaches that work with the gymnastics program, but we've reached the level where this recreation coordinator also needs some of that boots on the ground assistance with all of the recreation programs and teams and coaching and parents. So if you then flip to the back side of your handout, what we've provided for you here, and as Brian mentioned, we've looked at a lot of different options and opportunities over the last couple of years about staffing levels, but also then what and how do we bring these folks on. So if you look at 2017, this first column, which is the first column up here, we are bringing on 2 full-time employees in the fourth quarter of 2017. That's the facility coordinator and aquatics coordinator for the Bison Ridge Recreation Center. It's critical for us to get those coordinators on first. Then they will help with the hiring of the full-time positions of facility and aquatic assistants. From there, we are looking at some of so we start with the 2 facility coordinators in Q4 of 2017. Then we begin to bring on the facility assistants and aquatic assistants for the Bison Ridge in Q1 of 2018. Additionally, hiring the second facility assistant at Eagle Point and the recreation coordinator with athletics in the first quarter of 2018. Once we get the coordinator and main assistants online, we start bringing on the registration and program assistants in Q2, as well as the building attendants, because we need to get them trained. And I probably should have started that we're looking for a spring opening, and I don't know that we're ready to divulge that spring opening. But this allows for us to begin to have all of our full-time employees on and training the different levels. We will also be recruiting then for variable hour employees at the same time that we're bringing on our full-time employees, because we need to we actually start recruiting for Paradise Island in January, February. So we're going to be recruiting for 100+ staff at Paradise Island, plus the lifeguards for the new Bison Ridge, plus all of our variable hour staff for the control, the gym supervisors, the additional gymnastics, any of the additional programming people that we need. We're going to be bringing all those variable hour employees on, and it's a domino effect. So coordinators, assistants, variable hour employees. And there's a significant amount of training that goes into each and every one of those positions. So quite honestly, we are in a crunch. We are in a crunch. This will take an effort. HR has already put together a recruitment plan and schedule for us. We rely on HR for training. We impact finance. We impact basically every department with all of the folks that we're bringing on. So we felt comfortable that we can make this happen. We've, as I said, had a lot of discussion with Brian regarding timing and working with HR and their support and analysis. So I guess with that, I would open it up for any questions or clarification.
The only other comment I would make, you notice on the chart it has best time to hire, and you don't see any greens on here. We've already squeezed it down because the sooner we hire these folks, of course, the bigger the financial hit in 18 on 2K O&M. And as we know, we've tried to model out, we know revenues will increase over time. And so by being just as conservative as we can about when we hire in 18, it helps ease the pinch on 2K revenue in 18. So it's doable, but as Carolyn said, it's tight, and it's going to be all hands on deck to do the recruitment, hire folks, train them, and have them ready when the new rec center opens.
All right, comments or questions concerning staffing at the new rec center, Bison Ridge, and the existing rec center, Eagle Point. And I know Mr. Douglas has he had earlier some comments, so I'm going to allow him the floor now.
Thank you. My question is, a while back we had a contract with our custodians for the existing rec center, and then we have the new rec center, which is going to have to be cleaned as well. And I had proposed that those jobs be city employee jobs, not contracted jobs. And I don't, I'm sure this is not in the budget. The other thing too is with the new people coming on, I see there's a PM manager and all that, being suggested. I would like to see, I know we had some change in hours. I'd like to see these rec centers, when this new rec center open, that we need to have a change of hours, either on the weekends. Now we have from 8 to 5:30, I think it is. Let me bring that up. Got too many screens on here.
Can you put the hours of operation back?
Can you scroll back to that slide? Mr. Douglas is right. The hours on the weekend are 8 to 5:30.
And those hours are the same for both facilities?
Right, those are the current hours for
Correct.
Eagle Point.
I would like to see on Saturday and Sunday either from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is it only adds another hour and a half on. I understand that that's 3 hours and times 4. And then during the week, we're open from 5:30 a.m. to 9:30. Maybe we start out with 5 a.m. opening instead of 5:30, and then with the 10:30 being the closer. Just there's been a lot of people asking because most places have increased their times as far as gym time, and we just have a variation of people when it comes to work, their work schedule. If we were more flexible with our hours, I think if we open at 5 instead of 5:30, that would help a lot of people out. We would get those folks who are going to other places when they're open at 5. An extra half hour would make a big difference. And then as far as the closure, if we can extend those hours out and just see, and then track it and see how many people are actually using the facility at those times, then maybe we could, make some flexibility, adjust it after the first year. But at least when we open this facility up, we need to also have different time changes as well. Because yes, there's going to be a reflection. We did go and raise some fees, not all the fees, but if we had it, and when I say be open, I don't mean everything's open like gymnastics, swimming. It's more like the gym area, the workout, those areas have extended hours, not the programming areas like swimming and gymnastics. Or maybe swimming too, but for lap swimming. But just throwing suggestions out there. I saw the hours and I thought this is we're having a budget discussion. This is a perfect time to ask for that.
Brian?
I certainly understand the comment. If that's the direction council would like to go, it probably would be good for us to do some estimating of the additional cost to do that, which we wouldn't be able to do tonight, I don't think. I think it would take us some time to sort of crunch those numbers. But I think we could, if that's the consensus of council, we could proceed in that direction and then just report back, as we showed at the front end of the presentation tonight. If council's comfortable with the lease model for a number of our fleet vehicles and taking that excess fleet retained earnings money and putting it into the general fund for 18, we ended up with about $500,000 in revenue over expenses that could be used to offset any increase in costs related to those hours of operation. But we'd want to run that analysis and bring that back to you as well.
Because I figured on the hours, and just for what we have right now, we're spending about $1,000 an hour on operations, and that probably increase it by 5 or 6%, depends on what we decide to keep open. And then as far as the jobs, I know we have a lot of part-time employees with Rec Center. I would like to, with the HR, whomever, offer those full-time jobs to those part-time folks who are looking to seek full-time in the Parks and Recs department. That would be great for those folks who are seeking to stay with the city and make a career.
All right. Jason.
I'm going to withhold comments on the variable hours conversation. I feel like we've had that one a lot. In terms of the hours of operation, we just got done hearing the pinch that staff is in terms of posting, filling, training, ramping resources. My assumption is they've got a working model of what the staffing scheduling looks like with this plan and with the hours in question. I think it would be a lovely value add to expand the hours of operation if there is sufficient demand, and I'm not sure that the polling that you've done informally with the folks that you've contacted is sufficient to give us a basis from which to say, yes, let's add an hour at the beginning and end of each day, or whatever the case might be. So I think it would make better sense to me to allow staff to work on getting these positions filled and keeping all the balls in motion that need to happen in order to get this facility opened. And in the course of the coming year, be very aggressive about eliciting input from patrons about hours of operation so that the consideration can be made over time in terms of what are, I mean, the numbers proposed could be perfect. I don't know that, right? They may need to go stay where they're at in terms of open and stay open later. I have no idea. But without really polling the public in a genuine way, I don't know that it makes sense to sit here and provide direction on to staff to go back and assess adding additional resources. And, you know, just expanding the hours by that much could have a compound impact on the actual number of resources needed to fulfill that staffing. So I would just suggest that we open as staff is planning and assess on the way. I mean, if we get to a point where it's clear that the demand is outpacing the ability for the facility and the hours as they stand, there's nothing saying that in year council and staff couldn't say, hey, you know what, we want to increase. But I would rather do that in a reactive way than a proactive way and find that we've now potentially added staff and added cost to the operation, and then we find that there's not sufficient demand to warrant staffing at those hours, and now what do? You have a conversation that potentially you need to reduce staffing. At the same time that we're hearing a request to actually move away from a contracted resource to an employee resource. So I guess my 2 cents is let it proceed as planned and see where things, where the demand suggests we go.
Mr. Bullock.
I'm going to kind of echo what Jason just said. I would like to get the centers open and actually put out a survey to the participants about hours of because you know it's never the people that have talked to me. I can't say that it's any kind of definite survey. I always have people that say, well, we wanted to open earlier, stay later, and everything, but those are just few and far between. I would rather see, just like with the surveys we took for names and everything else, put it out there and see if people, after it's open and we actually have, so we can do some modeling for money before we actually would actually do something like that and find out we're spending money, you know, uselessly. Oh, that's the word, isn't it? Okay.
It is now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Carson.
On the chart that's showing the organizational supervisors and stuff, can you explain to me the last one for the supervisor adult/seniors? There will not be anybody in the Bison Ridge facility, is that correct?
So with the programming, we're not adding at the supervisory level, the supervisors are responsible for their program area citywide.
Okay.
Okay. Then the recreation coordinators, at this point, we are not recommending an additional recreation coordinator for seniors and older adults. Our coordinator will provide, just as the other coordinators, it doesn't matter where they're located, they're going to be providing a senior program, adult program, youth, teen programming citywide. So they'll be responsible for helping create those senior programs at both facilities. We're still looking at least at this time, that the bulk of our senior programming will come from the senior center at Eagle Point. Now, as we grow, it doesn't mean that we won't then have more programming specific at the Bison Ridge. We just have to kind of see what that looks like. At this point, we don't have a designated senior center at the Bison Ridge, but we do have an intergenerational programming area.
Right. So as far as recreation and exercise, nutrition, whatever that is. Will there be programs for seniors at Bison Ridge?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That, I guess that was my biggest
And,
question.
we have one fitness coordinator. Quite honestly, the fitness coordinator sets up the fitness and wellness programs for all ages.
Okay.
And then they might be promoted within the older adult or senior program area. In fact, our fitness wellness coordinator is part of the senior advisory committee on fitness and wellness. That person is actually the staff liaison there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other concerns, questions, or comments concerning the staffing of Bison Ridge and/or Eagle Point at this time? Only comment I have is I'm comfortable with the proposed staffing recommendations at this time until we have both centers open and operating and have a test period to see what staff recommends for any changes they may need to make up or down with staffing. Anyone else? Okay, now I recommend that we go ahead and pause for dinner and to make the decisions on some of the stuff that'll go into the rec centers.
And we do have an ask of council. If you would pay a visit to the atrium first. They are looking, the folks out there are looking for your feedback to make some final decisions about furniture and color choices. What other direction can we provide them, Michelle?
So if you all could head to, there's a main table. We want to start with reminding everybody the theming for Bison Ridge, because remember you gave us input on that a while ago. And that'll then help you inform the dot exercise. Everyone will have dots, and there'll be some choices between, some of them are A versus B, and others are mix and match. So if y'all could head out and look for Hillary, we can get started, and then you guys can have dinner.
Now, it might seem as if we're sending you out into the atrium so that we can eat first.
That's true.
Now, it is true we are going to eat first, but that's so that we can get out of the way, and when you come back in,
Let me
there won't
ask
be a
you
log
this
jam.
before I release everybody. Are we going to have a working dinner once we're done with that exercise? We get our food, come back in here. We're going to get back into the agenda, or do you have a time of when you want to start up again?
Well, let me ask Michelle. Generally, in years past, once everybody's had a chance to grab something to eat, we've kept working through the agenda, which we're perfectly fine with. How much time would we like them to take? Can we say 15 or 20 minutes?
That depends on them, but yes.
I just don't want to hold this off any longer than we have to. Let's try to at least be back into the agenda by 6 o'clock.
That sounds
35 minutes.
very reasonable.
Perfect. All right.
doing is walking through the feedback that you provided 2 weeks ago and putting it into the 2018 budget, and also with your feedback building the 5-year plan. This will be the first time that City Council has adopted a 5-year plan, so this will be a very big accomplishment for City Council. So as Michelle's walking through the information, she'll point out anything that's significantly different than what you saw 2 weeks ago, but your feedback when she walked through this information 2 weeks ago was very, very helpful in putting the finishing touches on this.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So just a friendly reminder that the reason we're creating this 5-year plan is to provide budget certainty and predictability and to really advance strategic goals and initiatives. So this kind of essentially formalizes a lot of your direction that you've given us over the years and gets us to a more sustainable document that we can also share and start telegraphing with the community. This has changed a little bit, but essentially what we did is we asked departments to submit what they thought was reasonable for capital investment in the categories of traditional, operational, or preservation projects. You may recall that's a framework you adopted. Operational was that bucket you wanted back in the beginning of the year. And we have about $207 million worth of needs. So clearly we don't have $207 million worth of money, but we did look at prioritizing them in a couple different ways. The plan you have in front of you, which is this sheet, so we've included a 5-year plan, and then we've also listed the unfunded items, which I know some of you had asked that we make sure that's a public list so we can continue to let people know what's not there. We really relied on all of the input you've given us to date. So all your previous philosophy approach that you've adopted in previous budget years and earlier this year was included. The other thing we did was take a conservative funding approach. So I'll quickly review the slides of what we had, but we used the funding we had in the bank, so that fund balance versus projected revenues. The other thing we did is we've also included a formal general fund transfer for capital projects that's based on a percentage of the total general fund budgeted revenues from 2 years prior. Previously on the 14th, we had talked about the year prior, but as you think about it, if we're planning right now for the 18 budget, we're looking at 2016 revenues. And so that's really a 2-year look back. And so that gives us some additional funding, and we can talk about what happens if you take that out. But essentially the CIP gets a lot leaner. The other thing we did was focus on funding preservation and operational projects first as they were submitted, and then certainly there were a couple traditional projects that rose to the top that you've already previously funded that we've maintained. But as you can see, it takes a while to get there, given our available money. The other thing we did was incorporate KIPCAC scoring, which we shared with you earlier, and your feedback. We also assumed the projected fund revenues based on historical trends. So we did, as Cheryl mentioned earlier, some of the revenues projected upwards, but some of our CIP funds the actuals were actually lower, so we've adjusted that in the model. We did not build a plan that predicted additional bonding or COPs based on our current debt capacity. So that's something that perhaps as we look annually at this 5-year plan that we adjust moving forward. Based on available revenue. And the other thing we did not build the plan on was unpredictable revenue sources, such as repayments or project closeouts. Again, we're adopting the philosophy we'd like to have that money in the bank with reasonable certainty. So what that does is it allows us then to every year look at the available fund balances and these potential one-time revenues that come back to the CIP fund, and then allows future councils to really make sure that the priorities that we have in the 5-year plan are still the priorities, or if we need to move something up or address a new need that's come in. So a quick reminder on our CIPP funding projections. So this slide is slightly different from the 14th. We've included the line capital projects. That line has adjusted to show what funds are coming out of what projects on the 5-year plan in front of you would be funded out of that. And then some of those projected revenues on the top have changed, again, because we've seen some lower numbers come in. On 2K, we've tweaked The miscellaneous line item and the bond and the 2K O&M lines are slightly different than the 14th. The miscellaneous reflects all of our program costs associated with the program, and then the 2K O&M is truly reflective of the policy and what we're proposing to do. And then we've still set aside $10 million in next year's budget. We're projecting that $10 million is for Tower Pena ramp, as we previously have talked about. So the draft 5-year plan is in front of you. We included a line of what has been funded for 17 in these general areas. So projects that had previously been assigned funding did rank higher. One note, we did I did acknowledge that this current year we did fund a traffic signal at 104th and Brighton. I did put that in as traffic signal TBD, but that is specifically assigned to Brighton and 104th in your budget book from this year. But you have invested in traffic signals over time. In terms of the 2018 proposed capital plan, we're proposing $1.8 million in pavement management. That would assume we're going to spend $880,000 of the projected revenues that are coming in this year, which is a little different than everything I've just said. But without that $880,000, we would only be spending $980,000 on pavement management if we just did the funding in the bank, and that didn't seem to align with your previous direction. That 880, if you recall, was previously tagged for the Tower Pena ramp. So what we would propose, like we mentioned last time, is moving all of the Tower Pena costs into 2K, and that will help us from an accounting perspective as well. We're also proposing to fund Parks, Recreation, and Golf Preservation. The original ask was significantly more than what we could afford, and that's kind of the theme for 2018. We are definitely scaling back what our proposed capital investment would be for 2018, just given the amount of available funding. And again, that reflects that we've had a lot of capital outlay the last 3 years. The other thing we're proposing to fund is traffic signal maintenance, and that's a critical preservation aspect to maintain signals and switches in our community. In 2018, we would also fund the culvert repair at the Peoria Bridge. We'd also put $85,000 towards sidewalk connectivity. That's been a critical program that you've funded in the past that we think we'd like to maintain, and that would be in addition to the CDBG money you previously approved. We also propose to formally earmark the Package B, the 112th Avenue. If you recall from Potomac to Chambers, we had about a $4 million estimate of 2K money, and then we have an additional $1.8 million that would go from the Second Creek Drainage Fund. So this would make that an official project, and we would put that money aside. And then we would put some money towards the 88th Avenue widening. So that was the number one priority from the KIPCAC, and certainly a priority you all have articulated before. We currently are funding a portion of a NEPA study this year, and so this will start us, if you carry 88th Avenue, for example, all the way through, this will carry about an estimated 20% would be our share of design and construction costs. But that could be a federally funded project through Dr. Cog, not unlike the NEPA study we just obtained. From 19 to 22, we are able to fund pavement management at $2.5 million after this coming year. The PRG preservation numbers fluctuate based on what staff believes they can accomplish. The 2.575 in the out year is for a significant irrigation project at the golf course. We also fund, again, traffic signal maintenance at the appropriate level, really, from 2020 to 2022. So let me stop on preservation projects. We can go through the rest of them as well. I'm reading the room.
Thank you. That makes good sense. Just a side question, I guess, on the 2022 irrigation item. Is that just due to expected wear and tear? Is that due to enhanced wear and tear due to the mineralization of the water? Any?
I'm going to look to Carolyn, but that's part of the master plan that the golf course identified. And
Age of the system. It's 20.
Right.
We're in 21 years now, right? So. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. So you previously gave us some direction that we could advance. I'm looking at Robert. I want to make sure that I say this correctly. Tower Road Pena on-ramp was not originally a 2K project. Yes, so the $10 million is for Tower Pena on-ramp and the extension of Tower. Mm-hmm.
Right. We're remembering this is a public meeting, so you might want to be careful what you share.
That's right. We went into an executive session, so that's what I can tell you.
So Mayor Pro Tem, we're assuming worst case scenario that the Tower Denver portion plus any additional costs on Tower Pena could be absorbed with that $10 million from 2K. If that number is reduced, that's great. It just goes back to the 2K fund balance. Would you like me to run through the operational projects? Or we could just start asking questions?
I would just generally ask, or generally say for the public, is the agreement a long time ago for the Tower Road expansion is a long time ago. So there's some inflation dollars along with some better improvements for scope. I'll call it scope creep, but it's the right thing to do. And that's how we got to the 10 million additional. Other conversations that are happening are exec session material. So generally speaking, that's what that line item is.
Okay. So within the operational projects, we do have a lot of concrete flat work and sidewalk connectivity, traffic calming, and traffic signals, all of which you've discussed previously as important within that regulatory bucket. So for 2019 through 2022, we would plan to do some ADA compliance work at some of our parks facilities at $50,000 a year. We would propose to do some additional concrete flat work with PRG and Public Works at those specific amounts from 19 to 22. And then we would also see our sidewalk connectivity program go back to about a $96,000 investment, again, exclusive of CDBG. In terms of our traffic calming, we're proposing to add money in 2020 and in 2022, so that could go every other year. And then we're proposing 3 signals, the 104th and Joliet signal in 2019, the 104th and Peoria signal in 2020, and then another signal that likely would be determined at some point in 2021. From a plan perspective, one of the big things that was identified by staff is the need for an ADA plan citywide. So we're proposing to spend $79,000 in 2019 to fund that. The comprehensive plan has also been a talked about item. That would be 2019. Outdoor warning towers are also important, and the police department has identified a every other year cycle and doing multiple ones consistently. So we would propose to fund those in 2019 and 2021. PRG master plan hasn't been updated for a significant time, and so we would propose to do that in 2021. And then we've set aside some funding for Irondale and some regional drainage in 2022, but certainly the results of the Irondale master plan could drive some different decision making in future years. And then there's a Fairfax Park light that would be in the out years as well. But those are the types of operational projects. Operational projects that weren't funded, just given available funding, some railroad crossing replacements, larger regional drainage improvements, some traffic calming programs, and some bridge projects in that initial time frame. Questions on the operational projects?
I am not familiar with a ADA master plan of any kind. I know there have been independent ADA efforts peppered throughout a lot of sort of standalone projects, whether that's through our parks program, through some building code things, through our own facilities, but I'm not aware of a citywide comprehensive ADA master plan.
I know what he's talking about. He's talking about the sidewalk connectivity plan when we started to put in the sloped ramps on all the corners, and we did so many each year for so many years to try to get all the sidewalk ramps ADA. Yeah, well, we did certain areas. Every year we did so much, right. But I don't think it was a master plan for ADA, but it was a sidewalk plan for ADA, and to try to get the sidewalks into ADA compliance, because I still recall some of the folks coming in and trying to make some claims that they had tripped or fallen in different scenarios. So we tried to update all our sidewalks at one point in time, but it was many, many years ago.
Under the Park and Recreation's ADA compliance plan, that's just not rec centers, that's all the parks, but when parks are built, aren't they automatically built under ADA compliance?
They are, so this would be an effort to evaluate any city facilities that aren't ADA compliant and try to create some sort of plan to thoughtfully update those facilities. But you're right, any new facilities built within the last handful of years would be in compliance with ADA already.
And the Parks, Rec, and Golf Department did do an ADA plan on their facilities, and some of them do need retrofitting, Pioneer Park, a few others.
Yeah, we have we've done an audit, and we actually did include even the new parks and Paradise Island Pool as part of that audit, just as a kind of, it wasn't as in-depth as the other facilities, but just to make sure. And so over time, we will chip away at meeting the current standards in parks recreation.
Right, Rick?
Well, this class I took this weekend up at Dr. Cog, of course, and now I'm on this senior commission, and after spending a whole weekend on senior stuff, sidewalk connectivity and ramps are on my agenda now. So that could be coming up more as I meet with these people. On another note, aren't we obligated to put a stoplight at 104th and Brighton?
Yes.
Yes, and that's included.
It is funded this year, so that $300,000 that I put in TBD is actually earmarked for 104th and Brighton. I just wanted to show that you were putting money towards traffic signals year over year. but it's actually in this year's budget, 2017.
Good, thank you.
All right, anyone else?
So,
Seeing no one else?
last but not least, we did fund some traditional project priorities, but these are certainly the more expensive ones, and they take several years to bank some funding. So 112th Avenue Chambers to Tower was the third priority of the KIPCAC, and I know many of you have talked about it. So we're putting money aside over the next 5 years. That timing does align. Roger's been in, and Maria have both been in communications with Oakwood and Shea, and that time frame does align with their plans, so we're not behind the game. As a matter of fact, it probably gives us some negotiating power to say that this is what we're committing to over the next 5 years. And then the 88th Avenue, as I said, that one can move forward, but it is going to take us some time to collect money. So we won't be able to start the design phase until we have collected enough money for that phase, and then the construction. But again, that's a federal project that we could leverage through DRCOG.
On the Chambers to Tower, 112th, obviously Shea and Oakwood, it sounds like you've talked to. Has Mark Bush been included in those conversations as well? I know through my most recent conversation with him, which has been now some weeks, I know he had interest in understanding what the plan was there, and his two in progress parcels both have 112th implications, and so we're just gonna continue to see the challenges on that road compound.
When we when we visited with him, his focus was on 120th Avenue, but we did talk to him about 112th as well.
I do have one question about Irondale. I know it's been a while since I brought it up, but I was receiving a lot of complaints about the dust and lack of dust abatement and things like that in the Irondale area. This summer, I haven't received as many complaints. I don't know if things have changed and where we're at, but as long as we're trying to do our best to maintain. Last I remember, you were looking at a new contract for dust abatement, and who was going to be doing that dust abatement and what kind of scheduling that was going to be on to try to keep those areas around those businesses more dust free. Can you give me a quick update on what we're doing in Irondale until we have the CIPP dollars to go in there and actually pave some roads?
Well, there's two efforts underway. I'll let Maria talk about the ongoing maintenance work. Maria is part of a staff team that's being led by Chris in Community Development to look at the area as a sort of a neighborhood study, and we'll be back to you this fall to talk about what the scope of that study will be, but it's intended to be a longer-term study to analyze and understand infrastructure needs in that area, primarily with respect to roads and drainage. But anything you can add regarding current maintenance efforts in that area?
We are trying to be more consistent with our dust abatement. A lot of those roads, though, are already paved in the Irondale area, so I think we're just trying to keep up with the CRMs more consistently and make sure that we're filling those potholes. And, for example, one of our citizens that's been outspoken, we coordinate with him before we go in there and do street sweeping to limit the dust that's entering his home. So we do try and do that and do some more publication before we go and do sweeping in there to limit the dust.
Yeah, it was the one business was saying, you park your car, and by the time it's time to go home, there's an inch of dirt on the vehicles, and it was just, and there was more complaints last year than this year, and I didn't know if you'd changed some of your maintenance, and at the time you were looking at trying a new dust abatement or contracting the dust abatement out, and I didn't know where we're at with that. Are we still doing the dust abatement, or we got a contract and have a different company come in and do it on a regular basis?
Yes, so our dust abatement program, we did contract that out. We have in the past as well. but we've been using a different product that it's a soluble molecule that expands and keeps that dirt as long as it's a little bit wet. So every time it gets re-wetted, so when we go in there and we blade out the road, and then we usually will spray it with water to reset those compounds to make
For a binder.
Yeah, reset basically. And so it's more expensive, but we think we're getting it a better product in the long run in terms of holding down that dust. And
All
since
right.
we do rotate the roads on how often we grade them based on how much traffic is out there, I think we've also noticed that the calls have gone down dramatically.
Yeah, I just didn't want to forget about our residents and businesses in Irondale. I know some of them get frustrated. There was a lot of forced annexation, and some of those roads are in pretty bad shape, and so I continually want to monitor that. Michelle?
Just to close on the plan, unless there's other questions, I want to tie it back to what Cheryl showed at the beginning. This plan, this 5-year plan, does assume transferring HUTF dollars and the road and bridge to CIP moving forward. And it also assumes that general fund transfer based on a 2-year look back every year. So a lot of these projects are funded through those funding sources. And then last but not least, I'd highlight your attention to the very bottom. One of the things that I know we discussed is program contingency. And for 2K, this was certainly a wise decision that we did and took money off the top to have money for those unexpected circumstances. And we never really had that in our CIPP program. So as Brian mentioned at the beginning, we're proposing to put $240,000 in this year to that contingency, and hopefully through future budget allocations, that amount will continue to grow to represent about 5% of what we have in our capital program, which is consistent with what we've done on 2K. But it's a huge step forward, and I just want to thank all of the staff and KIPCAC and you all for being diligent on creating a 5-year plan.
Great, thank you. Andrew?
I would just want to commend staff too. So last year in our budget retreat, we pulled out a lot of stops to get a lot of the capital improvement projects that we're doing this year to make them done correctly and the best advantage to the taxpayer dollars that we could have. Actually having this 5-year plan now is really a roadmap rather than looking at an Excel spreadsheet and saying, well, if we fund this, we can't fund that in future years, taking it all the way past 5 years last year. So this is a really good roadmap to see where we're at for future councils of whatever that looks like. So thank you again to everybody who worked on it.
Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else? Moving on.
We are officially in the home stretch. The last agenda item we have for the retreat today is to circle back to the spreadsheet that we shared the last 2 times we've talked about budget to show what my recommendation is on the additional requests that have come up as part of the budget process. This is a reset again of really where we started the day, given the discussion that we've had. The impacts on the overall revenue expenditures are fairly minor, but we will incorporate changes relative to your feedback today. So we're still in a very good position with about $500,000 in revenue over expenses. And so I wanted to, again, go back to the list of requests that came up through the organization in an effort to accomplish the outcomes that City Council has identified, particularly those 6 priority outcome areas that City Council identified at your retreat back in January. And the purpose of going back over the list is to reflect all the decisions that have been made up to this point, and then to ask kind of one final time as we wrap up the retreat, is there anything else on here that you would like us to fund in the 18 budget? Do you have second thoughts about something that is funded in the 18 budget that you don't think should be funded in the 18 budget? And not only this list, but anything else on anything else that's been considered over the last several weeks that isn't yet reflected in the budget that you would want us to be sure to include. before we start to prepare the formal budget document for approval. So open to discuss anything on this list or anything else that we didn't capture on this list that's still a priority of council for 2018.
Anybody have anything they want to bring up that's on the list or additional? Mr. Douglas.
Yes, thank you. On the bottom of the first page, second to the bottom, it says replace elevator at the existing rec center. Is it currently, is that, do we have two elevators there or just the one?
There's only one elevator. We did not recommend it for funding because it wasn't an absolute necessity. It does still function.
Yeah.
It is old. There are occasions when it's not functioning, which is a very unfortunate situation. Carolyn, can you add to that at all about the condition of the current elevator?
I hesitate a little bit. I think the primary issue is age. We have had some challenges that I shared with council. One in particular where it took a little bit of time was more about getting a contractor in to make those repairs. We did have a recent incident during shutdown, or currently in shutdown, as you may know. And we did have a breakdown with an individual in it, but we've resolved that. So I would say over the last few years, if I recall, counting the one that just happened, we've had 3 different incidents. I do think with some of the renovations, we'll have a lot of our fitness equipment on the main floor. I would say that when we do have, if we do have a need for service, we do have an option for folks to walk around the outside of the gym, the 3 gym floors, as opposed to walking on the track. So we do have some alternatives. I think the greatest downfall is the fact that it is old. If you were to install something new, it would be bigger in size. That's part of the challenge of replacement. So I don't know if that is what you're looking for, Brian, or if that's...
And certainly, given the age of that particular piece of equipment, if you will, it'll be important for us to set aside some money to replace it. Maria, if I'm not mistaken, we've just updated our maintenance contract for elevators in all city buildings. Anything?
No, excuse me. We're in the process of doing so. We have to wait until the current contract is up for expiration before we can go out for new bids.
And any impact? Will that have any impact on the usefulness of our elevators?
I don't think so. Our requirements per the state, you have to inspect it on a monthly basis. So we're continuing to do that to meet requirements, and we'll maintain it as we need to.
So that's some additional background on why it hasn't been recommended for funding, but certainly open to council feedback about that.
The only question I have is, if we're in the middle of doing a major remodel of that rec center and having contractors in there and moving walls and doing everything now, financially, would it be more mindful of the taxpayer dollars to try to take care of it while we're in the process of all of the work that's going to be happening in that rec center, to do it all at one time than to go back in and retrofit it, especially if there's other size issues, as Carolyn was alluding to?
Well, renovating or replacing that elevator with a larger one would have a significant impact on the renovation plan. So it was not planned as part of the scope. This $140,000, I believe, represents the cost to replace the existing elevator at its current size. And I do know the size of the elevator is one of the challenges with it, but we did not plan to replace it with a larger one just because of the cost.
Okay. Renee.
Okay, I have watched people with scooters, the big ones, the small ones, make use of that elevator, and it's been totally adequate. I I don't know if there's new regulations out that we have to have a larger elevator, but I don't understand why we would need a larger elevator if I've never seen anybody get stuck in it, and I've seen some, I did not say that. But I've never seen anybody get stuck in it in the biggest of scooters that go, so I'm wondering why would need, because if we put a bigger one in, the maintenance room behind it to do all the maintenance for, it would have to be enlarged. It's not just the elevator, it's all the things that go along with the elevator. So in its present size, why would we have to get a larger elevator?
We are not required to enlarge the elevator, but one of the ideas was, would it make sense to replace it with a larger elevator? But again, we did not include that in the scope of the project, given the extensive cost to do that. Anything else you want to add, Michelle?
I was just going to add, no, we do not need to replace it. The size issue came up with, from an emergency response standpoint, fire and or paramedics not being able to always use the elevator, but they have one flight of stairs to bring someone down. It's not like you're maneuvering multiple flights.
And we've confirmed it's ADA compliant
yeah.
and meets all the regulatory
That was
framework.
my next question. Thank you.
Stretcher in the elevator when they had a person. Well, I mean, as long as he doesn't fall off, strap him in and hold him up.
Anyone else before this gets out of hand? Before. Trying to cut it off, Paulo. All right, moving on. Mr. Douglas.
On the page 2 on the bottom, the pole cameras, was that for the police department?
Those are something we went over last week.
Yeah.
And they have a joint agreement with the Metro North Task Force, and they can get use of those when they need to. This
Okay.
would be to justify that we have them at our whim when necessary if we buy into it. And after hearing from the chief and the city manager, they chose to continue to opt out this year, correct? Chief? There we go.
Thank you.
Next. All right, moving on, Brian.
So we are essentially done. We will, based upon your feedback tonight, prepare the final draft budget document and begin moving it through the formal adoption process. We do have a few separate but related follow-up items. The fees and charges resolution that I mentioned. We'll have to bring forward a contract this fall to put into motion the enterprise solution for leasing some of our vehicles. You see here the formal steps left in the project, in the process. Bear in mind, this does not mean you cannot make changes to the budget. Certainly the point of that formal adoption process is for council and the public to be able to comment on the budget, potentially make changes to it. But I would say the lion's share of the work on the 18 budget is now done, and with your direction, we will assemble the budget book. So thank you very much for your feedback.
I want to take the time to thank all of the staff. I know we get to see the finished products, but I know the process that you all have to go through to help get this all aligned to present it to us. And, you know, I like this process of getting some of it during the study sessions and throughout the last couple of months to lead up to today, not being as strenuous on everybody. But I want you all to know that all the long hours that we're not spending with you on the budget when you are putting everything together is truly appreciated by this council and should be equally appreciated by the residents of this community. So thanks to each and every one of you and your staffs that have worked on the outcome of this budget. All right. Thank you all. for being here tonight with us, and Roger has one more thing.
Yes, sir. This is not related to the city budget, but General Improvement District. We have the ECA GID, which is the E470 Commercial Area General Improvement District. And currently there is one development that is within it. And that developer has asked consideration for lowering the mill levy on a temporary basis. Pardon me?
I don't know that we want to do that informally at the end of the budget retreat. Is there an opportunity for us to present this back with some information in a packet for them?
Yes, the intention is to simply, are you open to considering such a question, at which point then we would work with the developer and provide that information to you, bring that information back. So it's just a simple question of, are you willing to allow us to have that conversation, or is that not something you want to even entertain?
Well, I think it's important for the council to be able to see how this would affect the overall GID performance and how the breakdown of that mill levy to the GID and what that GID is intending to do with that mill levy revenue for future uses. How that will affect the long-term plan, and I don't know how we can get through that without having it in a study session to consider. But I'm open to seeing the information and what has led up to this in a study session for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a very nice evening, and we'll see you, at least some of you, on the 11th. Have a nice Labor Day.
Who's all going to fish?
What day?